Mainstream science says not to trust your own senses, as if what you were born with isn't good enough for you to use to interpret your own reality. What you need to do instead is just leave it up to people who are more intelligent than yourself to give you their interpretation of reality, and you need to just absorb that and regurgitate that and operate according to what they've told you.
The way we teach science is you're just some empty vessel and we pour the science into you and then you regurgitate it on an exam.
Like a good citizen, like a good sheep. But that's not going to work for a lot of people. A lot of people are coming back to a conclusion that their five senses are, in fact, the only tools that they really need in order to determine what's real and what's not, what's feasible and what isn't concerning their reality. Let's have a quick discussion about the ISS. What we know about the ISS is that apparently it's supposed to be the size of a football field. This thing was supposedly constructed in the upper atmosphere. Once you leave the surface of the Earth, you get to a certain altitude and then gravity just turns off. Here on Earth, gravity's supposedly pulling everything towards the center of mass, but once you get up to about, 90 miles or so above the surface of the Earth, suddenly gravity just switches off and you can orbit. Sure, why not? So we're supposed to believe that the International Space Station is 250 miles above us, the size of a football field, and it's speeding around the Earth, orbiting every day multiple times, going at the breakneck speed of 17,000 miles per hour, somewhere around that. Well, recently I forced myself to watch about 15-20 minutes of the ISS live feed, and during that time I noticed a couple things. Well, for quite some time there was no land. There were no land masses that this thing was supposedly flying over for that amount of time. But I'm just watching that. It just seemed to take a while. Perhaps they were flying over an ocean, supposedly, at that time. But, someone in the feed says, okay, look, here we are, about to come up on California. The ISS is supposed to be going 17,000 miles per hour. If we're looking at the speed of the ISS approaching this landmass, and then we have to think about the length of the United States from west coast to east coast, which they were saying that it was going, over, it was approaching the west coast of the United States. Okay, so we're looking at the speed of approach that it's supposedly approaching the west coast of the United States. And the length of the United States from west coast to east coast is said to be 2,680 miles across from coast to coast. Okay, now, as we look at this ISS going at the breakneck speed of 17,000 miles per hour, supposedly, think to yourself, does this really look like it's moving at a speed to where it's going to be able to cross over the entirety of the continental United States in 10 minutes? Just look for a minute. Does it look like it? In my opinion, I'm going to go with no on that one. But, I rely on my own senses, my own common sense, basically, to say, no, it doesn't really look like this thing is going to cross over the whole continent in 10 minutes going at that speed. So anyway, moving along, looking at some other things. I did some screenshots, did some video captures on this supposed live feed. Now I noticed some things. Looked like the solar panels were kind of a little more flexible than you would expect them to be. You see in this one picture, you see the solar panels are kind of straight, and then seconds later, you see them curved. Weird. I just thought that was a little odd. And that seemed to happen the same time that the horizon was going through these fluctuations in how curved it was. There were points where it was just ridiculous looking. Like, you can tell whatever they recorded this video with was obviously a fisheye lens. So, check the horizon. You see how it lines up here, and then you see how it lines up here. Doesn't have a whole lot of correlation if you just look at the amount of curvature coming from the right side. But again, this is just more things to think about. Alright, now moving along, the ISS is said to be 250 miles above the Earth. That places it in a level of the atmosphere called the thermosphere. According to online searches, the alleged temperature in the thermosphere is said to be between 900 and 3,632 degrees Fahrenheit in the thermosphere, where the ISS is supposedly at. Now, that's one of those things that I talked about already, like the ISS, the external components. A lot of that doesn't withstand the melting temperatures and all that. You think about the aluminum, you think about the glass from the solar panels. Also, by the way, let's take a look at one of the astronauts' gloves here. Okay, this glove, this looks like rubber. Looks like it might be plastic, but whatever it is on this astronaut's hand out in space in the thermosphere doesn't look like it can withstand 900 plus degree temperatures. Okay, so we have to think about these things. I'd have to conclude at some point that these astronauts would get fried if they were out in these temperatures. You know, I mean, come on, what are these spacesuits made of? Seriously, vibranium, adamantium, perhaps, iridium? I don't think so. Looks like these same suits that they use in these these pools that they do their training in, which is also ridiculous because the way that water works is not exactly the way that space would work. Because water, what that does, that kind of creates pressure around the astronaut. Like the deeper you go in the water, then the more pressure it's going to be pushing in. Well, whereas if you're in a vacuum, there's going to be more expansion, in theory. Just more stuff to think about. If they're trying to mimic the idea of zero gravity in a pool, then yeah, that might work. But as far as the way that the suits are going to interact with space, that doesn't really work out the same. Also, I'd have to conclude from what I've seen that the ISS live feed, it's on a loop. And if you sit down and watch the ISS live feed long enough, you're going to see where it loops at. And there's a point where the astronaut turns around, goes into selfie mode. Okay, you can see his face clearly, and then all of a sudden, bam, the visor pops up, and you can't see his face anymore. Like, it's magic. What that shows is either live editing or that it's on a loop. I'm going to say this thing's on a loop because I've actually watched a lot of the ISS live feed, and a lot of it just looks the same. It seriously, take some time. If you feel the need to, take some time. And every now and then, just pop on. Just check it out for about 5 minutes. You know, the next couple days, check it out for another 5 minutes. Next couple days, go on a couple more minutes. And you'll start noticing that, okay, this looks like the same stuff all the time. So I'm thinking that the whole ISS live feed, it really does look like it's on a loop. And you can tell where it loops because the astronaut goes from clear to he's covered. Without any hesitation. You didn't see him hit a button and the visor came down. It just went from one to the other. That's a red flag, in my opinion. There. Again, I conclude that maybe the ISS is made of something that can withstand those temperatures, but the space suits, no. Astronauts would get fried as soon as they got out. Period. But this is where the heliocentric enthusiasts will come out and say, but solar radiation, indicating that the sun works differently because the sun is 93 million miles away and the sun puts out a certain type of solar radiation. Now in space doesn't really have any matter. There's no particles for the sun's heat to connect to in order to create those temperatures. So heat works differently out there. Since it's a vacuum, there's no particles. It's not the same. But when those solar rays come from 93 million miles away and enter Earth's atmosphere, then we get to actually feel some heat. Basically, that heat and temperature work differently out in space. How convenient. Personally, I find it somewhat more feasible that the sun is actually a local source of light and heat, just as we perceive. I find it to be more feasible that the sun is not 93 million miles away, that it's small, that it's local, that it actually does spend most of every year making a clockwise circuit near the equator, which is why the equator is always maintaining a constant temperature for the most part throughout the year, as we perceive it, because we know, people in those regions, those islands, those continents that are right around the equator, they experience the same temperatures throughout the year. So it just makes more sense that the sun is local and that the sun has a certain temperature, and that heat from the sun and the light from the sun, it's because the sun is close. It's not because of some magical radiation from millions of miles away. That doesn't make any sense. But if you think about a light bulb and how you can see a light bulb from a distance, and if you get close enough to that light bulb, you can feel the heat from that light bulb. I would surmise that that's probably how the sun works. But these are just things that I want to share with you about the way that I perceive reality. Could be, maybe not, but it makes more sense. It's a lot harder to believe that whole 93 million miles away special type of radiation travels through the infinite vacuum of space and then suddenly ends up here and suddenly we can be warm. That's odd. And if that could work that way, then there wouldn't be such great temperature fluctuations from the equator to the supposed poles. The North Pole gets a lot colder, and the equator is about 85 all year, something like that. And then the South Pole, Antarctica, it's all frozen tundra. I don't think that a couple of thousand miles, of latitude are going to cause such a great variation in temperature if the sun is 93 million miles away and the rays hit the sun parallel, like we're told according to the heliocentric model. Just give me some things to think about. Just some stuff to consider. But anyway, that's all I got for this one. Just wanted to share those things with you. What I've been doing lately is just, I've been watching a lot from plaintruth.info. That's a shout out I'd like to do. Go over, check out plaintruth.info. Subscribe to his channel if you haven't already. He gets into a great detail about a lot of the things that are going on. Mandela effect, the Jesuits, a lot of good information, lots of stuff. He covers all kinds of topics, like he's constantly on this thing. So great information coming from him all the time. He gets into the fiat currency system, the fake media. I mean, you name it, he's on it. He's got a video about this stuff. So check out plaintruth.info. Just want to do that quick shout out. Other than that, that's all I got for this one. As always, be good to each other. Take care of yourself. Stay flat. I'll see you next time. Thank you.
If you'd like to get in touch with me, please do so through my website, dmarble.info. If you'd like to support my efforts, please go to the tab at the top that says Health Store. Click on that tab. It'll take you to a storefront. You can register as a customer and start shopping. Also, you can reach me at any of these other social media platforms. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.